Hello everybody and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. I of course am your host Trenton, and man, if there is one thing, if you had to pin me down and say what is the one thing that you have seen make the most money at a festival, if I was a beginning maker, I would answer you hands down the BBQ Fork. So even when I was in Andersonville with Jay, the man that taught me, one of the things that sold so well was a $20 BBQ fork. And there's a reason behind this, because understand, most people, most civilians that are going to come into your shop have no idea what you do. All they think is that it's cool. It's kind of like watching somebody look at a very fine painting who knows nothing about painting. They don't care about the technique or the brush stroke. It's just cool, and somebody else they know may like it, and that's why they buy it. It's going to happen the same way with the BBQ fork. They're not going to appreciate that it's hand done, or they're not going to appreciate that it's nicely textured. It's a BBQ fork, and Dad back home thinks this stuff is cool. It's only 20 bucks, and that's what sells. You can have S hooks, you can have J hooks, but nobody really knows what they're for. Everybody knows what a fork is for, though. So that's one of the reasons they sell so well. Now, when Jay did most of his work in Andersonville, he had some common stock sizes that were really his money makers, and this is that stock size. This is 1/2 inch by 3/16. Jay used this particular steel to do forks and spoons, all types of barbecue tools, and a lot of his home furnishings, including his J hooks and things of this nature. Arguably, there was no more profitable size stock of steel. So, this has been cut for a barbecue fork. This piece is 24 inches long. What's going to happen is we're going to start down here on this end. We're going to mark off 3 inches, and we're going to have to split this guy to make the tines of the fork first. Now, you can do this frontwards or backwards. I tend to try to do the forks first, just because if I screw them up, I'd have it wasted the rest of the piece. Or you can start from the back. It doesn't matter, either or. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to start up front, mainly because I want to tell you about a very important item that blacksmiths usually aren't associated with. If you're used to doing knives, you begin to understand exactly why precision becomes important. If you're marking off a knife for a guard and you're filing it out, you're going to have to be precise. If it's too small, it won't fit. If it's too big, you're going to have a very nasty solder gap. So that's where things like this, known as dial calipers, really come in handy. Now, everybody says, well, how did they get things so even and precise back in the day? And the simple answer to that is they didn't. The vast majority of work that's out there isn't pretty. It's not even. It's really kind of haphazard. It's only today, because we're so used with machine done work, that we kind of really have this super eye for things being perfect. And I'm very much on that end. If I were a smith back in the old days, I wouldn't care if one side was lopsided. If it did the job, it didn't have to look pretty. But we're going to make a compromise, and that's where a pair of dial calipers can really come in handy. For example, when we are ready to actually measure this, to actually split it out, we're going to do this hot. But if you don't have some type of guiding mark on there, some type of pre-made line, you're going to end up with some really fugly looking tines. So the closer you can get your mark, the more accurately you can cut it, and consequently, how much more even and better looking your tines are going to be. So, and this is only a 1/2 inch wide. So if we want 1/2 of a 1/2 inch, we're going to set this to 1/4 inch. There we go. And then very simply, we simply rake it down the side. And now I have a bright line right here that I can now take my chisel, and while it's cold, very carefully chisel myself a 3-inch line that will allow me to see it clearly in the fire and be able to do my hot cut without a lot of problems. Something this small, 1/2 inch wide, is very difficult to cut evenly. That's why you can use calipers to help guide you, and they are super handy, and you will find more and more uses for these as you become more and more skilled as a smith. You're going to find that in complicated projects, layout is absolutely the most vital thing you can do. So I've got me a little mark on here. Let's go over to the anvil, and I'm going to go ahead and chisel out 3 inches. Now, I don't know if you guys can see it on camera, but I have a faint line that I can see pretty well. You may not be able to see it on camera. And what I have is I have a chisel, and this is a pretty sharp chisel. Now, this is the thing. If you've got a chisel that's straight from the factory and there's a really sharp bevel right there, you won't be able to see where that edge hits this piece, and that will cause a problem. So get a chisel that's kind of been rounded up so you can see where the edge is hitting. But very simply, I come down, and I follow that line. Now, as I walk it up, I'm overlapping the chisel in the previous cut by about 1/8 of an inch, just so that I'm lined up. And I'm not looking to cut, I'm just looking to mark. Now, the wider your chisel, the easier this is. All right. There we go. Now, that's a line that you're going to be able to see in the fire pretty easily. So now what I'll do is I'll take my heat this guy up, and now I can come back with my hot cut. And again, make sure your hot cut is freshly sharpened. Don't let it be all ginked up. And then we're going to come in and, again, do the same thing, walk this up to split the tines. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing this, this doesn't have to be at El Blazo Scorcho heat. It can be at a low orange, and you're just fine. Again, this is a precision deal, and you don't have to do it all in one pass. This is a surprisingly delicate operation because the steel is so thin. Or narrow, rather. Again, you see me overlapping everything. And there's our second pass. Here's our second heat. And this guy isn't a really super hot piece of metal. It doesn't have that much energy in it. So you don't have to worry about cooling that chisel nearly as you would with something large. There's our next pass, and you can see we're nice and even right there. So let's take one more heat and see what we can do. Now, since I'm cutting through, what I have added is I've added a little bit of a plate right here, a cutting saddle, which is actually my punch plate, but it will do as a cutting saddle. Again, don't get greedy. There's plenty of fire. You're not going to run out of fire. Just don't drop stuff like I do a lot. But again, take your time, and you can see that we're getting a good cut. I'm going to walk this on up by taking another heat, and then we should be good to go. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is if you're watching that and you're seeing my piece bounce around, you're going, man, why is he fighting it so much? Isn't he a professional shop? You're absolutely right. I usually don't have to fight a piece this much, but the problem is my anvil is not set up to do work like this. Why? Because if I'm making forks, I use a metal cutting bandsaw that has a fence, and I say, and it's all over and done. Here in this situation, you need to have a holdfast or something else to be able to lock that piece down on a saddle that's at the same height. So again, I want to point out that when I tell you, you really need to make your tooling to what you're working on. That's the case. I'm doing this by hand just to show you guys, but here I am in a professional shop, and I'm having to fight this because I don't have the right tooling set up. I'm having to do it for exposition, and that means that the piece is walking around, falling on the floor, and generally being crappy. So understand, that's why tooling is so important. Had I the proper holdfast and things of this nature, it'd been click and bam. That's not the case. I'm having to take my time, and I'm still getting the job done, but not nearly as effectively or profitably as it would be if I had the specialized tools for it. This should be our last heat. Right where I want it. this aggravating joker here. You think you're the only one that has problems? You are not the only one that has problems. I'm going to drop some more stuff. I'm going to go to my backup punch, or backup chisel. And even though my crap's breaking, ha-ha, victory. There's the split. Fork tines are absolutely a very delicate situation. You need to be aware that it's very easy to burn these up, and you don't want to overwork them. So now that you've got your cut, the cut's not square. You have a flat side, and then you have kind of a beveled side. You're going to have to work that a little bit to get it back square. It's going to take a little bit of finagling. Remember, even though that the tine is going to have a point on it, just like we learned in the previous lessons, that taper is just on the tip of the tine. You have a lot of length there. You don't need to worry about tapering. You just need to get that tip down to a sharp point and get everything else nice and squared up. Now, you can avoid having to square it if you round it. It's really a matter of personal choice. Squaring takes a little bit more time, but it's good practice. So I don't know what I'm going to do. We'll find out. We'll see. Now, just like before, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bend one of the tines out of the way. Now, notice I'm not coming down square. I'm actually tilting it over so that I can square up that cut. And now if you look there, you can see we're square because I had to turn it way over here. Also notice how fast that thing lost heat. It's simply because this is super thin metal. So this is going to be one of those situations where you're going to have to be very patient about going back and forth in between the fire. But this guy is squared, looking good on that end of it. So what I'll do now is take another heat, come in, and make that tip. And this should be the easy part. And there we have one tip. Now I am going to round this. I'll knock the corners off of it. I generally think a rounded tine looks a little better. Looks a little cleaner. And there we go. We'll take another heat, move this tine out of the way, bring this one back, square it, point it, and then round it. I'm taking off that cut edge. Getting it to come down square, and we're good to go there. Notice I'm using a much smaller hammer here. This is about a 3/4 pound hammer. So I'm not doing a lot of heavy work, just a lot of light blows to move this. One of the biggest issues you're going to have is with this thing either going rhombozoid or folding over to make a cold shut. So you've got to have a lot of light blows as opposed to a few heavy ones. Again, notice I'm working just the tip. And with my remaining heat, I come back in to round this up. And now we've got two good tines. Take this right here. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this, some easier than other ones, but I'm going to do something here that you'll like. Now, I'm going to straighten these guys out, but then we're going to spread them over the corner of the anvil so that they are almost 90 degrees to the bar itself. And now, I'm going to open this up. Now, the reason for this is because the crotch is rarely a pretty place to visit, and such is the case here. So by spreading this open, we can get in with the hammer and clean that up. You can even go in there with a rat tail file and clean up right there in the middle of the crotch. But it is excellent practice to always keep your crotch clean. And there we have it. Yeah. Now, there are several different ways to actually make those tines. There's several different shapes, all kind of forms. Some of them bow out like a bell and come back in and curve and all fancy. Some of them go wide and go straight. There's several different colonial and historical patterns that you can use for that end of it. Normally on mine, I don't get too terribly fancy. One thing, though, I would highly suggest that you have before you get into this is some type of cutting hardy for your anvil. Sound odd? Let me show you. So this is my cutting hardy. It has a 1-inch shank here, and it's about 3/8 of an inch thick. What this does is that when you start to straighten your tines, they're going to get all wonky because you don't have anything to hammer a tine against except in one dimension. Going up and down where they're flat, that's no problem. You can hammer that. But what about here? You've already got them spread, so they just go all kooflankled, right? However, if you have something like the cutting hardy, you can take the two forks and go like this, and this allows you to hammer in from the side and straighten the tine. So the edge of a metal table, something that you can get the tine split into, like just cram it right up there in the crotch, will help you tremendously. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on the end of the anvil right on the crotch. I'm going to work both sides evenly. Don't do just one side and then the other one. It's not going to work out even. You can see there. And now I can flatten very easily, and I can put it on my hardy and adjust a little bit, and look how nice that comes out. Now, don't let me fool you. If your first attempt comes out that straight, count yourself lucky. This is a bit of a nightmare to get straight and nice. I'm going to tippy tap tap just a little bit more. And now for the coup de grace, what I'll do is I'll lay it over the roundest part of my anvil, and right on the tips I'll work it just a little bit, and then on the back to give it a little bit of a curve that helps it pick up the meats. Now, even this one, as close as I have gotten it, I'm probably 3/16 of an inch out on the tips. That's no problem. You can go with your grinder, clip that, grind it back. There won't be any issue whatsoever. But if anybody buying this guy says, "Oh, look, it's 3/16 of an inch out, I'm not going to buy it," you don't need their money anyway. So at this point, you've got a nice poker on the end. You can make the back end and the twist and we'll be done. However, I'm going to take a little bit of extra time, and I'm going to encourage you to do this as well, because my early forks, I did nothing to this shank right here. It was just stock material, and that means it was stock surfaces, and it looked crappy. Didn't look good. Didn't look like professional work. So we're going to take a little extra time, and what really sets this thing off is to make a taper down to the fork. So what we need to do is we need to kind of taper it to this front, but there's a real trick to this, and that's where our spring swage is going to come into handy. Now, I don't have a spring swage for my anvil. I actually have one that's just actually got a bolt through it. You've seen it before, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to use this to make sure I get a nice even joint right in front of the fork. Now, guys, I want you to take just a moment to appreciate what a hammered piece of poo-poo this looks like. That's right. It does the job. It works. Let none speak against it. All right, we've got a good heat. I'm going to pop this in our swage. And again, I'm just going to nestle it up right there to that end. Not being crazy with it. Just working it down. Won't get a little crazy. Got to be a little crazy. And look at there. You can see how it's nice and wasted now. So now I'll start right here, just like with a standard taper, and start working that thing back. Now, real quick again, I've spoken before about what an advantage for doing hardware and things that the solid fuel forge is, simply because it doesn't radiate the heat that a gas forge does. I'm working this piece with my glove. You can see I can hold it like this. Well, the problem is that with a gas forge, don't think you're going to hold it that close. You're going to have a cooked hand in short order. That's why you have to have tongs if you're working with that gas forge, because the heat's blasting out straight down the rod. There are some significant advantages when you're doing hardware using a solid fuel forge that you're not going to get with a gas forge. We have an excellent heat. You guys can see how we're pulling that in right there. I have swapped to a heavier hammer because it's a little easier. And you're going to be surprised how little it takes to get a nice running taper. It's going to go a little catawampus. That's okay. Take your time. Try to keep it in line. If it gets a little off, that's okay. The great thing about this thinner steel is it can actually be bumped around cold. And again, just getting that little taper in there really makes a visual difference to the piece. Makes it look a lot more hand worked. Now, of course, we got those super square edges on there. I'm going to come in and I'm going to break those edges. Always break your edges. If you break the edges on a piece, it will make good work look great. So here we are. We've got a pokey end and we're doing good. Now we just need to fix this end. Now I have taken the time to actually hammer and break this entire thing. The edges are broken. Even the surface has been hammered a little bit. And it's going to make a real difference in how this piece looks. So, but right now, to do our handle, it should be pretty easy. We're going to have to make two 45-degree bends. You guys have seen this in the spring swage. It's a bit different way of doing a bend, and it's a little bit more advanced, but it ends up making a much neater and much quicker product if you get good at it. We're going to have a little tab on the end, about a 1/2 inch, that we're going to fold at 45 degrees. And then here, we're also going to make a 45-degree bend, which will be the bend that delineates the hook from the rest of the piece. Now, how wide or how long in between there, that's going to depend greatly on the diameter of your mandrel or what you're going to try. Now, the cool thing is, if you're doing this on the anvil, you're kind of freehanding it, it really doesn't matter as long as you're close, because you can adjust it to fit. This is the one place where if you have a mandrel, there's going to be a very particular size you're going to want that. You'll have to calculate it, have to play with it. So I'm going to shake hands with Danger here, and I'm going to kind of do this a little freehand on the mandrel, because I cannot remember for the life of me what the exact measurement is. So I'm just going to play a little bit and see if I can get it right. Okay, you guys can see the bends that we've made. So basically this goes up against here like this, and we start wrapping. So you picked the best wrap that your lips can say. Actually, I got a little more beef than I thought I did. Now, you can see it's too short for that particular size. However, since I'm freehanding it, I can bring that joker on down into spec, and that is not a bad looking hook. Ta-da! All right, so we got a pokey and a hook, and the only thing that I suggest you do last is add yourself a nice twist to the middle. Now, this is very functional, but the twist really sets it off. So, very simply, we'll take a heat, go over to the vise, use our bar, and we'll make a 180 twist in there and get her cleaned up. And then I've got a super special secret sauce to show you how to sell even more of these. So, let's go this way. Cha-cha-cha. Now, it doesn't really matter where you want to put this. I usually, make sure I've got myself a good area for a hand grip. And I'm a little cold right here, but I'm cheating. 'Cause I'm a cheater. And I got away with it. Oop, get that out of the way. You guys can see the nice twist right there. Now, here's another trick. You'll like this. If it's a little cockeyed, put it back in the vise and actually use the vise to pull it in straight. And no problem at all. Now, for the secret sauce. Now, one thing I really haven't discussed here on the channel is how important a very particular piece of equipment is. And that is going to be your touch mark. This is a steel stamp with my name, Trenton Ty. And this is arguably the biggest advantage you have in selling something. Now, here's the deal. I think I'm cool. I think I'm special. And my work is not bad. There are plenty of smiths out there, a lot of them here on YouTube, that will hammer circles around me. But they're not me. So if somebody comes to buy something, one of my books, one of my S-hooks, one of these pieces, it's a good piece of work, but they're not here because you have the greatest barbecue forks in the world. They're here because it's you. Now, the thing is when they have just a plain fork, well, so-and-so made this. But how do you prove it? That's where the touch mark comes in. If you have a piece of material from an artist and somebody says it is, yeah, we believe you. If it carries their stamps, there is an extra bit of oof that comes with that. These stamps, I bought this one right here. I think this one was $120. The touch mark is going to be your particular legacy. And I do not mean this to be hyperbolic or facetious. Understand your mark is going to outlast you. You will be dead while these things remain. This mark is your key to immortality, period. Today, even as other blacksmiths, the first thing that happens when I find a hammer or something else, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the touch mark. The smith that made it has been dead 100 years, but I want to know who it was, who put their mark on that steel. And there's a lot of people buying this stuff that feel the same way. When I sell a few of my books, the first thing people ask, hey, I know it's your book, but will you sign it? Absolutely, I will sign it. It's my book, but putting your personal mark on there means the world to a lot of people because they're not buying your S-hook. They're not buying your barbecue fork. They're buying a piece of you, and that's where the touch mark comes in. Now, if you want to ask where to get these, you're in luck. Ta-da! So for the past 15 years or so, I've actually been buying my touch marks from this place right here, Steel Stamps Incorporated, run by Mr. Tim Purdy. I didn't know I was actually buying my stamps because Mr. Tim over the years has used a couple places as basically as proxies to take in orders and make stamps. Mr. Tim has done me an incredible job on my stamps over the years. Literally every stamp I've ever had since I started smithing came from this company. When you call, you're going to talk directly with Mr. Tim. And if you tell him that I sent you, I talked to him the other day, and he's going to give you a bit of a discount on these. It's really that important. And Tim has done me an excellent job, and I would recommend you going to him. Now, full disclosure, Tim did not pay me to say this at all. He said that he would give me my stamp for free if I did, but I said, no, that's not how it works here on the channel. I pay up front, I pay my dues, and I only recommend stuff that I believe works. Just like the Ameribraid grinders, nobody's paid me to speak about them. They are things in my shop that work well, and Mr. Tim Purdy has done me a solid. Now, he did send me an extra one for free. I have to fess up, and I'm very happy with it. So, but if you guys want a touch mark, go see Tim Purdy at Steel Stamps Incorporated. You'll talk directly to him. It's a good guy. He'll do you a good job. Now, enough with that. Let's put our mark in the fork. Now, I do most all of my stamping hot. So I've got my stamp here. This piece is about 1,000 degrees, maybe 1,200. It makes a really nice deep stamp when you do that. It's upside down, so sorry, my bad. But you can see it makes a nice deep stamp. And now this piece is way more important to somebody than just the fork that I made. It's got my signature on it, and it will sell for 20 bucks. And here you go, folks. One grade A pokey thing, ready to go to work and stab some pork right into buttocks. Yeah. So, again, guys, this is a great thing to practice. It sells well. It puts a little bit of money in your pocket. And again, it's cheap, cheap, cheap. That half inch by 3/16 material is very cheap. You can buy a lot of it. This is an excellent, profitable item for you to use in your shop. And again, it's handy. It's something that's functional. Remember, guys, that blacksmiths pride themselves on making something that was useful. That's one of the things that kind of separates blacksmithing out from a lot of other crafts. The stuff that we make is useful, and people find value in that. If you're an artist and you make a painting, it has value because you can look at it. A blacksmith can make something that not only looks awesome, but is useful, and that is a powerful tool when you're trying to sell something. So, try some of these out. They're, like I said, super handy. They shouldn't take you long to learn, and they will put money in your pocket. Now, one other announcement here. You'll have to wait to find out. But again, I want to make a special thank you to the Patreons that have come on this past month. I think we've doubled our Patreon numbers in the past 3 weeks. Again, wasn't that huge to start with, but it's a hell of an improvement. Okay. Thank you guys so much. There have been many of you that have actually upped your donation because you've seen the work that's been going on, and I thank you very much. As a result, if you are a Patreon member and you've given over $20, I will be drawing one random Patreon member who will receive this very fork, and you'll have to wait to the next video to find out who it is. But again, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. The likes and the comments and the subscriptions, it makes a difference. I'm getting to see it on the back end. Feels good to be back in the saddle, and man, I could not have done it without you guys. Thank you very much. I hope you feel like you're getting your money's worth. So that's it, guys. Until next time, you guys be good, be safe out there, and I will see you in the next video.